skeptic Chris Morrison. Welcome, Chris.
Hi there, Kevin. Nice to be here.
Thank you very much. Well, this is a common syndrome, isn't it? Celebrities, famous rich people telling us, live your lives properly in order to save the planet. Excuse me while I get onto my private jet. The latest, well, we're talking about Emma Thompson. Do you remember her famous trip back first class for Hollywood? When she got to Heathrow, she proceeded directly to an Extinction Rebellion demonstration in the centre of London. Leonardo DiCaprio, he travelled 8,000 miles on a private jet to accept an environmental campaigning awards. Harry and Meghan, we know about them. They're rarely off private jets. Taylor Swift is a one-woman ecological disaster, flies everywhere private jet. Kylie Jenner of the Kardashians recently took a 17-minute flight to avoid traffic jams in Los Angeles. And Bill Gates, who goes everywhere by billionaire Bill, of course, goes everywhere by private jet, says, I am not part of the problem. That, of course, is because he offsets his flights by buying trees or something like this. Bill, you are a part of the problem. Why should we put up with these hypocrite celebrities who tell us how to live their lives, but lead their lives in a very different way without, it seems, so much as a thought for the environment, especially Archbishop Air Miles?
Yeah, I mean, they don't care. I mean, Dame Emma, of course, when she flew from LA to stand on the pink boat when Extinction Rebellion were depriving people of their livelihood for 10 days in around Oxford Circus, flew first class. And when she was asked if she flew, why didn't she fly economy? She said, not bloody likely. It's the same. I was fascinated, or I was intrigued by this the Potty Prelate story, Archbishop Air Miles. If you recall, 2 years ago, just before COP26, this sort of boondoggle they held in Boris Johnson was running it in Glasgow, he turned around and said that anybody who wasn't in favour of cutting down on climate change and doing their bit for climate change was guilty of indirect genocide. So, excuse me, what are you doing flying, 48,000 miles around the world? You obviously, the idea, of course, is he's very much of the Extinction Rebellion, Roger Hallam view that billions will die in the next by next Tuesday school of thought.
Yeah.
But he obviously doesn't really believe it. He just believes that you will cause indirect genocide if you fly around the world. And this is the whole point of all of these people. They don't believe it. It applies to them. And they of course they buy, as you say, trees. They buy these carbon offsets. It reminds me, if we're talking about the Archbishop, we're talking about the indulgences of the medieval time, where please make me holy, but not just yet. So buy, you could buy indulgences to stay on the right side of heaven, and this is exactly what they're doing. In the meantime, the parishioners in his churches, if there are any parishioners left in the Church of England churches on a Sunday, the churches are invariably rather drafty and cold on a Sunday during the winter. And of course, he's now insisting that they all go to net zero by 2030. So he's going to take out all of the gas boilers in these churches that were never very warm anyway, and he's going to put heat pumps in and dig up the yards and put all these pipes in and all this sort of stuff. And the place is going to be absolutely freezing, and nobody will go there. So,
well, you know what they say, Chris, God works in mysterious ways. So he's just done all of these flights all over the shop to, as I say, Africa, Gaza and Pakistan. He's just got back from Zanzibar and will soon be travelling on more important eco trips to Guatemala, El Salvador, Panama and Costa Rica, all later this month. I mean, if this planet is going to be destroyed, the Archbishop will play a big part in that destruction by the sounds of it.
Yes, yes. And I noticed that they come up with a lovely phrase. It was in the Daily Mail that the Archbishop, of course, doesn't travel, only travels, luxury on a long distance, which they all say, of course. But then, the last time I travelled on short distance, there wasn't any business class anymore. The seats were all as small as anything anyway. So obviously, he also goes with his entourage and this sort of thing. And he obviously travels in a considerable style. I remember the Prince of Wales, now King Charles, who was forced one time to go down to business class. And of course, Charles is a great environmentalist, and he complained that the business class seats were too uncomfortable. The raw posterior was obviously used to slightly more sort of, more padded
Yeah.
upholstery when he flew. So again, the John Kerry is another one. The climate czar, Biden's climate czar, recently stepped down to run his campaign. And his family actually owned a private jet, didn't just rent it, like paupers like Harry and Meghan do,
Yeah.
like I do. His family actually owned one, and he came up with the fantastic thing. He said, of course, we have carbon offsets, but he said, but our work in saving the climate is more important than ordinary people. I mean,
Oh
this
God.
these people sort of say this is what they think. They're a class apart. Um, Now, we can sort of take it one further that if I personally don't have a problem with the Archbishop, he can fly all he likes.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I do not have any problem with all of these people going anywhere they like on private jets, first class. Do what you like. I don't care. Because I don't really buy into the alleged climate emergency. But what I do care about is their hypocrisy, lecturing us. Do as we say, not as we do. That's what I do find unacceptable.
Yeah, of course. But it was always so, wasn't it? I mean, these people are very secure in their positions. They're not going to get fired by anybody. The whole net zero fantasy, and as you say, you can look at science and is CO2 a danger? I personally don't think it is. We probably need a little bit more. I mean, because we're at a very low level. But leaving aside the science, then the whole net zero fantasy is a massive punch down from elites. It's a massive punch down on working class people, and you saw this with ULEZ, with Mayor Khan's, taking away the cars of the poor.
Mm.
When they're talking about 44 grams of meat and taking away efficient transport and cutting down your flying, they're not talking about themselves. They don't think it applies to them. And the slight danger, and I think it's a shame that in this current election, I think net zero will be a significant part, but it won't be the biggest part because there isn't a cigarette paper that you can put between the two parties. But it really needs to be sort of sorted out because people, if you take away hydrocarbons, which is what Welby wants to do, he wants to make the church net zero by 2030. What will that do? Hydrocarbons are not just the energy, the heating, they're in everything. They're in the medicines, they're in fertilizers. You take away fertilizers and half the world's population will die.
Yeah.
If you really want to go down your net zero fantasy, there won't be anything to build with except rammed earth. As one UN report said, there won't be any medicines, there won't be any plastic, there won't be all sorts of things because all of these things come from hydrocarbons. If you just stop oil, we simply go back to the dark ages.
Yeah.
And we're having an election now, and you have two parties that are saying we are going to go to net zero by 2050. This is insanity. It's insanity.
I totally agree, and I know it's sort of a pas de rigueur to quote Liz Truss, but she's right on this, and I agree with her. Old Rishi Sunak, it is starting to, vaguely listen to people, and guess what? He's learned to his surprise that people actually aren't that keen on spending thousands of extra pounds every year on green levies on their energy bills. Liz Truss said, I've got a good election gambit, and it's this: get rid of all green levies. But of course, Rishi's only partially listening because he said, what we're going to do is reduce them. When are these politicians going to understand? And I'm sure you've talked to more people about this than I have, Chris, but I've never met anyone who said, I really like paying these extra levies on my energy bills. I've met lots of people who said if they got rid of them, I'd vote for them. Why won't they do that? Because the carbon net zero is just some sort of vague concept that nobody can quite put their finger on. They don't quite know what it is. I'm not sure these politicians know what it is. And for that, We have a country full of windmills and solar panels that can never fully fuel this country. And we have all this extra money put onto our energy bills, thousands and thousands of pounds a year. Surely any sentient politician might go, if I get rid of those, it might be quite popular. What do you think?
Well, if you got rid of them, you'd have to get rid of Mr. Dale Vince. You'd have to make him bankrupt.
Yeah, sold, sold.
So there's a result. No, no. Yes, I mean, the reason that we can't, of course, is it's all set in law. We had Ed Miliband to thank for that in 2008, and then we had the wonderful Theresa May, who, having had a premiership full of absolute disasters, decided as her legacy that she would sign us up for net zero completely, 100% by 2050. We've had Lord Deben and we've had Chris Stark and all these people from the Climate Change Committee constantly going on mainstream media. It's all fixed in law. I mean, when Rishi Sunak, for instance, pushed back the banning the sale of internal combustion engines to 2035, it was a nothing. It was a nothing burger because he kept in the fact that from this year, manufacturers of internal combustion engines will have to pay £15,000 for every car they sell if they don't make a 22% of the total sold as electric vehicles. That is going to destroy the car industry because nobody wants these electric vehicles now. All the virtue signaling people who've got them have got them. All the tax breaks on corporate fleets, of which there are about, I think, 5 out of 6 cars are corporate. Nobody wants them. So the car industry is still stuck with these enormous prices, and they're already talking. They're talking about leaving the country. In Germany, it will destroy the car industry. And in this election, we have car industries, we have constituencies all over this country where they rely on the internal combustion car. You're going to lose your job. Yeah. And also, Mr. Kinnock, Steve, is it Steve Kinnock, who's the MP down at Merthyr
Stephen Kinnock, yeah.
Stephen Kinnock. I bet he's having a nice time explaining how all those steelworkers' jobs have been destroyed in Port Talbot. Port Talbot will be decimated by this idea that we can't use coal to make steel. So all over, you're seeing people starting to realise the effects of this. Now, when you talk about are people realising, it's interesting in the States where it's much more polarised. The Democrats really are net zero fanatics. The Republicans, particularly under Trump, are not. So you'll see, and some states are, some states aren't. There's much more of a divide. If you look at polling evidence there was a poll last year where they ask people how much they're prepared to pay. Because everybody, if you say, do you want to save the planet? Everybody says yes.
Yeah. These polls, yeah. The politicians say, no, we've got the polling. It proves that people support our environmental policies. That's because the poll is, on balance, would you prefer the planet to survive or would you prefer it to be destroyed? Who's going to answer the latter? It's nonsense. But carry on. Sorry, Chris.
Always look at the question they ask. Yeah. But if you ask questions like how much you're prepared to spend, carbon tax or something, it was amazing. I think it was something like about 50% of the population weren't prepared to spend more than, is it $2 a month? They're not prepared to even to take the chump change out of their back pockets to pay for this. And yet, as you say, our electricity bills, all buying football clubs for Dale Vince and tens of millions of subsidies for the likes of people like Dale Vince, all shoved on our electricity bills. Nobody asked. And of course, if you were to ever ask people about the true cost and point out the true cost of what's happening on their electricity bills and saying, would you like to scrap the net zero subsidies? And by the way, would you also like to scrap the net zero fantasies, doing away with that hydrocarbons and medicine and plastic and all the other things, I'm sure the answer would be, hell, get rid of the blooming thing. But of course, they don't ask questions like that. Journalists don't ask questions like that on mainstream media. Politicians don't set questions like that. And polling companies who are paid, if you like, to set certain questions don't ask them anyway.
And then the rest of us, so you in an informed way, but people like me, we go, Is it just me, or is this all completely insane? And it is. And by the way, parting gesture, not only can they not sell electric cars anymore, they can't rent them. They can't hire them out anymore. People
That's right.
don't even want to hire them, let alone buy them. So they're going the way of diesel cars, I think. Chris, fantastic to talk to you. Please come on again soon. Let's chat again. Environment editor of the Daily Skeptic. Read Chris Morrison's work. It is well worth it. You find it online. Daily Skeptic. Put it in and read his work. It will educate you as to some of the nonsense these virtue signalling politicians are putting us through. It is absolute madness and nonsense, and don't buy it. Don't fall for it. Next